She didn't cause a scene. She didn't raise her voice. She simply stood there, calm and composed. Yet, just minutes later, she found herself under interrogation behind closed doors. Why? Because she was a black woman in the exclusive first-class lounge at Cleargate Airport, USA. Among passengers clad in designer outfits and rolling glossy suitcases, a modestly dressed woman moved quietly, towing a worn carry-on behind her. Her gaze was serene, devoid of arrogance, yet every pair of eyes around her brimmed with suspicion. A security manager signaled coldly, a lead flight attendant feigned indifference, and a radio button clicked. She may not have known she was being watched, or perhaps she did, yet chose to remain silent and unruffled. Then, in full view of the other travelers, two security officers approached with tense expressions and probing stares. But there was something they didn't know. An unseen power held by this seemingly ordinary woman, one that governed the entire airport, and when she reached into her bag and pulled out her phone, the fate of an entire airline began to shift forever. This wasn't just a story about racial prejudice. This was the moment truth forced a system to reckon, and everyone waited to see what would happen next. The first-class lounge at Cleargate Airport is reserved for the elite, an opulent space of gleaming marble floors, leather armchairs, and soft music whispering sophistication. The guests here radiate power and wealth. High-end fashions, polished leather luggage, and expensive jewelry, all on display. But today, something was different. Through that sea of extravagance walked a black woman whose presence shattered the familiar elegance. Her name was Alicia Morgan. She wore a simple dress, her hair neatly pinned back. No flashy accessories, no designer handbags, no costly jewelry, only a faded navy carry-on in one hand and a phone displaying a clear first-class e-ticket in the other. From the moment Alicia stepped into the priority area, all eyes locked onto her. No one spoke, but the air crackled with unspoken doubt. Passengers whispered among themselves, their covert glances laden with curiosity and skepticism. A few airport staff stationed at a distance began murmuring into their radios, eyeing her as if weighing whether she belonged here at all. Alicia seemed to sense the scrutiny, yet her face remained perfectly composed. She stood with quiet dignity. Every subtle movement was magnified under the watchful eyes around her. Occasionally, she glanced at her phone as if reaffirming her right to be there, a calm so steady it only intensified everyone's attention, as though her mere presence were a challenge to some unwritten rule. Across the lounge, Rachel Barnes, the veteran security supervisor, known for her strict, non-nonsense approach, zeroed in on Alicia. Rachel missed nothing. She studied Alicia, from her scuffed shoes to her slightly frayed carry-on, from her understated hairstyle to the oddly serene expression on her face. Every detail fueled her suspicion. Without hesitation, Rachel tapped her radio, her voice chillingly precise. Priority Area 1, suspicious passenger. Initiate immediate inspection. Moments later, two security officers emerged from the main entrance and strode toward Alicia. Their gazes were locked on her, their hands hovered over their radios, steps tight with anticipation. Yet Alicia remained unmoved, utterly unflappable. She understood this was only the beginning of a considerable test, but what no one expected was that Alicia Morgan was far more than a routine traveler. A secret of immense power lay hidden, one capable of upending the entire dynamic of the first-class lounge. And this was just the beginning. At the same moment, the two security officers began moving toward Alicia. Rachel Barnes's gaze never left her, not even for a second, from the surveillance desk. Rachel was infamous at Cleargate Airport for her extreme strictness, perfectionism, and unrelenting coldness. With over 15 years of experience, she handled the most uncomfortable situations with a poker face and a voice as hard as stone. Yet, today, Alicia Morgan's unassuming presence unsettled her in a way nothing had before. Rachel knitted her brows and coldly reevaluated the woman before her. Everything she saw in Alicia contradicted the image of a VIP passenger Rachel always envisioned. In Rachel's mind, a first-class traveler not only had to be impeccably dressed, but also visibly wealthy and powerful. Alicia's simplicity felt like a direct affront to the upscale environment Rachel oversaw. Rachel glanced at the security monitor, names, seat classes, and passenger data scrolling rapidly across the screen. Alicia's ticket was crystal clear. Alicia Morgan, first-class priority boarding. But to Rachel, this wasn't a technicality. It was about prejudice. A bias so entrenched that she was convinced Alicia must be up to something shady, perhaps exploiting a cheap upgrade offer, or worse, a passenger who didn't belong there at all. Without hesitation, Rachel tapped her radio again, her words sharp and icy. "Verify the identity of the black woman at the end of the priority line immediately. I need to know exactly who she is and why she's here." Her voice wasn't loud, but it was unmistakable, and it made the entire security desk tense. Some officers exchanged knowing glances. This wasn't a routine safety check, but a request born of their supervisor's unspoken prejudice. Alicia calmly waited her turn at the boarding pass checkpoint, showing no sign of fear. A moment later, a young female attendant approached, polite but wary. "Excuse me, may I recheck your ticket and ID, please?" Unfazed, Alicia produced her phone displaying the e-ticket along with her passport. As though she'd anticipated this, but from the surveillance desk, Rachel cut in over the radio. "Hold on. Don't clear her yet. Ask her to explain the purpose of her trip and confirm her seat class in detail. I don't want any mistakes in the priority area." Rachel's cold insistence made the attendant hesitate, though she complied. Avoiding Alicia's steady gaze, she asked softly, embarrassed, "Miss Morgan, could you please confirm the reason for your trip and why you're using priority boarding?" Only then did Alicia look directly toward the security desk, locking eyes with Rachel's suspicious stare. She neither glared nor wavered. Her calm communicated that she fully understood what was happening and was ready to face it with unshakable poise. "I'm flying to Seattle on business," Alicia replied, her voice clear and crisp like crystal, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "And yes, my ticket is confirmed as first class." Rachel Barnes allowed a faint ice-cold smile to flicker across her stern face. Even though Alicia had answered perfectly, Rachel remained unsatisfied. This was no longer just a routine security procedure. It had become a covert battle between two women, one wielding security authority and ingrained bias, the other exuding serene confidence and quiet dignity. The tension in the air grew heavier. The nearby security staff waited anxiously, and surrounding passengers focused their attention on the checkpoint. Unease rippled outward, foreshadowing a confrontation that was about to intensify. From her vantage point, Rachel studied Alicia with the steely determination of someone who believed she would soon expose a weakness. She was certain Alicia would crack. She always did. What Rachel couldn't imagine was that Alicia Morgan was nothing like anyone she'd ever encountered. The unseen battle had only just begun, and Rachel was about to learn that she had severely underestimated the woman she'd chosen to make her next target. When Alicia's gaze met Rachel's, the space around the boarding desk froze. Rachel strode down from the surveillance desk toward Alicia, each footstep echoing heavily against the marble floor. Her eyes were sharp and provocative, as though this had ceased to be a routine security matter and had become a silent battle between authority and human dignity. Rachel halted in front of Alicia and cast a cold glance at the e-ticket on her phone. She lingered just long enough to make her point, then lowered her voice so that every word landed like an ice-cold pebble. "You're in the wrong line. Economy is over there." Her statement, though quiet, carried clear intent. Nearby, passengers immediately turned to stare. Curiosity mixed with discomfort in their eyes. The once elegant lounge now felt suffocating. Everyone sensed that Rachel was deliberately belittling Alicia, and they all waited for an angry response. But Alicia didn't flinch. Instead of reacting in anger, she lifted her chin and met Rachel's eyes, head-on. Her gaze was steady, unshaken, exuding calm resolve. A gentle smile curved her lips, not one of submission, but the smile of someone utterly confident in her own worth. "I know exactly where I belong." Alicia's composed yet powerful reply froze Rachel for a heartbeat. A flicker of outrage sparked in Rachel's eyes, her pride stung by Alicia's quiet challenge. To Rachel, who prided herself on controlling every situation, Alicia's unwavering poise felt like a slap to the authority she wielded so firmly. Rachel clenched her jaw, forcing her face back to calm. Without another word, she turned to the officer at her side, her gaze ice-cold, her finger flicking in a silent command. "Escort her to the interrogation room. We need to verify her information." The two officers immediately advanced on Alicia, their expressions conflicted but obedient. Alicia offered no resistance, no argument. She simply nodded as if she'd anticipated this moment and followed them. Her stride was unhesitating and dignified, the wheels of her suitcase whispering across the marble, underscoring the heavy silence that now filled the first-class lounge. Rachel remained rooted to the spot, her eyes fixed on Alicia's back brimming with resentment. She vowed to make this woman understand the consequences of challenging her authority. Rachel had never felt so furious. To her, this was a matter of honor. She would not rest until she proved that no one could stand before Rachel Barnes and defy her power. What Rachel didn't know was that Alicia Morgan was far more than an ordinary passenger. Behind that unassuming exterior lay an invisible force capable of turning the entire Cleargate Airport upside down with a single phone call. And Rachel was about to face consequences she could never have imagined. Their confrontation had only just begun, but the tension and stakes had already reached a breaking point. What came next remained a dramatic mystery poised to unfold. As Alicia disappeared behind the door of the security interrogation room, Rachel finally turned away, concealing the excitement churning inside her. In that moment, Rachel believed she had claimed victory. She had no idea that the real contest was only just beginning, and that the unassuming woman she'd dismissed held the decisive card capable of upending the entire Cleargate Airport. Rachel returned to the surveillance desk, her face still alight with triumph. For Rachel Barnes, security wasn't just a job. It was her realm of authority, and she would never allow anyone to outshine her. 15 years of strict oversight had taught her to judge people by appearances, and ingrained biases. To Rachel, Alicia Morgan's simple attire marked her unworthy, regardless of the clear evidence on that first-class boarding pass in her hand. What neither Rachel nor anyone at Cleargate Airport could know was that behind that unremarkable e-ticket, Alicia wielded immense power. Just yesterday, Alicia Morgan had signed off on an emergency $4.8 billion bailout for Grand Sky Airlines, rescuing them from imminent bankruptcy. One signature from Alicia meant thousands of airline employees could keep working, hundreds of flights could keep departing daily, and most critically, the financial future of a once iconic American carrier was secured. Not only was she a top financial executive with massive clout, Alicia also led the Special Internal Review Division at the prestigious Advalink Group, tasked with conducting covert evaluations of ethics and service quality among key partners. Today's first-class ticket wasn't for leisure. It was part of a Level 3 mystery audit Alicia had arranged in secret. One Grand Sky leadership knew nothing about until now. Alicia understood that to truly gauge staff integrity and customer treatment, she needed to blend in. No flashy attire, no hints of privilege. Her unassuming dress, polite demeanor, and quiet confidence were all strategic. She hadn't come to sample first-class amenities. She'd come to see whether everyone, from senior management to frontline staff, honored their duty to treat every passenger with respect. Yet from the first moments, Alicia had seen the hidden culture of bias permeating Cleargate's operations. Rachel Barnes, a manager who should have embodied professionalism and ethical conduct, had instead let personal prejudice guide her actions. Insulting a passenger simply because she didn't fit Rachel's narrow idea of luxury. Now sitting under the harsh lights of the small interrogation room, Alicia felt no fear or regret. If anything, the importance of her mission burned brighter than ever. She knew this evaluation was about more than airline service. It was a powerful message to anyone in public service. You must never compromise a person's dignity. Outside, Rachel still believed Alicia would soon admit her mistake and slink away in embarrassment. She had no inkling that her own blind confidence and persistent bias were pushing the very airline she swore to protect to the brink, threatening the lifeline of nearly $5 billion in critical funding. From her lofty perch of authority, Rachel Barnes had underestimated the woman she tried so hard to demean. But soon enough, Rachel would learn that Alicia Morgan was far more than a first-class passenger. She was the one holding Grand Sky Airlines' financial fate in the palm of her hand. The showdown between prejudice and dignity was far from over. Alicia knew she held the final say in this battle, and she was prepared to do whatever it took to ensure no one else would suffer the injustice she had just endured. In the small, discreet room, the neon light overhead cast a cold glow as Alicia sat upright, her hands resting lightly on the icy metal table. She showed no emotion. Her eyes remained calm and razor-sharp. The instant the door clicked shut behind her, Alicia knew she was about to confront the most deep-seated invisible prejudices face to face. Seated across from her was a tall security officer with a stone-cold expression, his features carved as if from marble. He flipped open his notebook, his icy gaze brazenly sizing Alicia up before he spoke in a low, loaded voice. "What is your full name?" "Alicia Morgan," she replied crisply, her tone steady and unhesitating. He jotted a quick note, then looked up, his manner uncompromising. "What's the purpose of your flight today?" "Business?" Alicia answered calmly, offering no further detail. He sneered, suspicion flickering across his face as he eyed her simple attire. A gray turtleneck, basic slacks, low-heeled leather shoes. Nothing like the VIP image he encountered daily. "If this is a business trip, why are you dressed like this?" His tone turned harsher, as though questioning her character and worth. Alicia did not flinch. Tilting her head, she met him with a gentle yet piercing look. "How I dress has nothing to do with my trip's purpose. What are you implying?" The officer faltered, unprepared for such a sharp retort. He gestured to a female colleague, beginning to search Alicia's small bag. Inside the unassuming canvas sat her laptop, a notebook, and a large sealed envelope stamped with the Advalink Group's red wax logo. The woman held up the envelope, brows raised. "What's this?" "Work documents," Alicia replied tersely, her voice firm. "We need to inspect it," the officer declared, hand moving toward the seal. "Before she could break it," Alicia's voice rang out, measured and authoritative. "To view the contents, you'll need an attorney and a court order. Anything else would be illegal." Her words froze the room. The two officers exchanged startled looks, clearly taken aback by her calm command of legal rights. They'd never encountered a passenger so composed, so resolute. Outside, Rachel watched on the camera feed, her smug smile slowly fading as she witnessed Alicia's quiet strength and legal savvy. Rachel felt both irritation and a flicker of unease. She hadn't expected her intended target to respond so decisively. Inside the interrogation room, Alicia said nothing more. She slipped the envelope back into her bag and zipped it shut, a silent declaration of her authority. Locking eyes with the officers, she added in a steady tone, "If this is a random security check, note that in your report. If someone specifically requested this, I want the reason in writing." The officers were speechless. The balance of power had shifted. Alicia Morgan now controlled the situation. The door opened again. The two officers, clearly flustered, motioned for her to leave. Alicia rose, her posture unwavering, her stride confident. She gave no sign of emotion, only absolute resolve. Back at the monitor, Rachel's face wavered, between anger and confusion. She realized her once rock-solid authority was fracturing. The woman she'd underestimated was emerging from that room, holding all the real power. What Rachel didn't yet know was that Alicia had silently recorded every detail, ready to use it as evidence in her internal audit. This was no longer just Alicia's personal battle. It was about defending the dignity of every passenger who might otherwise fall victim to invisible bias. The struggle between power and justice was far from over. But Alicia was prepared. She understood that her calm determination was the sharpest weapon in this fight. When the interrogation room door clicked shut behind Alicia, Rachel stayed glued to the security monitors, a thin, cold smile playing on her lips, one of pure satisfaction. She'd always believed that anyone who crossed her path would bow and submit. Today, this unassuming woman had proven exactly how absolute Rachel's power could be. With arms crossed, Rachel leaned back in her plush leather chair and sipped her now cold coffee. She watched Alicia, trapped in questioning yet unbroken, and felt a rush of triumph. Alicia's unnerving calm only fueled Rachel's irritation and steeled her resolve to teach this woman a lesson about the limits of power and social status. She turned to the nearest officer, her voice dripping with smug contempt. "Look at her acting like she's in control. It's ridiculous." someone who doesn't know her place, thinking a ticket grants her entry into our world. The junior officer beside her forced a nod and a tight smile, clearly uncomfortable with Rachel's blatant malice. Yet, no one dared speak up. They all knew Rachel's ruthless reputation for crushing anyone who questioned her authority. This wasn't mere personal satisfaction. Rachel intended to use Alicia as a cautionary example. Let anyone dare challenge her and they'd face public humiliation. To Rachel, power wasn't a privilege. It was an absolute she demanded everyone respect and obey. What Rachel didn't know was that in that very moment of cruel glee, her discriminatory remarks and gloating attitude were being meticulously recorded. Alicia hadn't come to Cleargate Airport by chance. She'd equipped herself with a hidden mini-camera entirely separate from the airport's security network. That tiny camera captured Rachel's condescending tone, her insulting words, and the malicious delight on her face throughout the interrogation. All of it would become key evidence in the covert internal review Alicia was conducting, an audit of Grand Sky Airlines staff ethics and professionalism. Unaware of her impending undoing, Rachel continued to recline, comfortably monitoring Alicia's image on screen. She didn't realize that her arrogance was endangering the very airline she believed she was protecting. Nor did she see that her cruelty was betraying the values Grand Sky professed: fairness, respect, and integrity. She glanced at her watch, confident that any minute now, Alicia would emerge, embarrassed and broken before Rachel's authority. In reality, Alicia left the interrogation room in a completely different posture, one of a true victor. The only person yet to notice was Rachel Barnes. On the other side of the door, Alicia stepped out wordlessly, her silence leaving the security officers unsure how to react. She knew exactly where real power lay, and she intended to wield it, not for revenge, but to reassert a far greater principle: the dignity and equality of every human being. From her seemingly secure perch, Rachel would soon have to face the grave mistake she'd made. By then, it would be too late to undo her words and actions. Everything Rachel had done today would be used against her, bringing her uncomfortably close to consequences she could never have foreseen. The hidden battle Rachel was so sure she was winning had already turned, and the woman she had most underestimated, Alicia Morgan, was quietly running the show, holding the key to the fate of Rachel Barnes and Grand Sky Airlines in her hand. When Alicia stepped aboard the plane, she realized the story of Prejudice was far from over. The moment she appeared at the first-class cabin entrance, every pair of eyes snapped to her. Curiosity mingled with suspicion, almost as if she were a stranger from another world. Though she just endured a demeaning, unfair interrogation, Alicia remained composed, quietly making her way to the seat assigned to her. Not long after Alicia settled in, Sarah Barnes, the flight's lead attendant and Rachel's close cousin, began service in first class. Just like her sister, Sarah was renowned at Grand Sky Airlines for her polished professionalism. Yet beneath that veneer lay a cold, judgmental streak. She evaluated passengers by appearance and status. Having heard Rachel's tales of the odd woman in the lounge, Sarah was determined that Alicia would not enjoy a single comfortable moment on this flight. With a practiced smile, Sarah glided down the aisle, offering warm towels and drinks to each wealthy passenger. She greeted them courteously, inquiring after their needs and comfort. But when she reached Alicia's row, her expression froze. She shot Alicia a passing glance of complete indifference, then turned away, as if Alicia were nothing more than an empty seat unworthy of her attention. That deliberate snub was unmistakable, a clear message to Alicia and everyone around her that this passenger didn't belong here. Neighbors shifted in their seats. Some whispered under their breaths. Others shook their heads in thinly veiled displeasure. Yet no one dared speak up. Beside Alicia sat a well-heeled, middle-aged man in a bespoke suit, Rolex gleaming on his wrist. He'd watched Alicia board, and Sarah's cold dismissal only emboldened his contempt. Leaning toward Alicia with a mocking smirk, he murmured just loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Looks like anyone with enough money can buy a first-class seat these days, huh?" His sneer carried in the cabin's hush. A few passengers chuckled. Others averted their eyes, tacitly supporting his prejudice. But Alicia didn't react the way he expected. She simply turned her head, her gaze calm, confident, and composed. With a gentle smile and a quietly sharp tone, she replied, "Do you really think money alone earns you a place like this?" The man stiffened, clearly caught off guard by her pointed retort. He looked away, his face a brief flash of embarrassment and discomfort, unwilling to continue the conversation. Alicia said nothing more. Her politeness remained immaculate, but inside she knew this battle wouldn't end so easily. Up at the front of the cabin, Sarah glanced back at Alicia. Seeing the man fumble for words, Sarah allowed a satisfied curl of her lips. To her, Alicia's presence in first class was a stain to be scrubbed away as quickly as possible. In Sarah's eyes, real first-class passengers presented a certain image, and Alicia, to her, was nothing but a lucky recipient of a cheap upgrade. What neither Sarah nor Rachel realized was that they'd walked right into Alicia's trap. Despite her modest appearance, Alicia wielded enormous influence over this airline's financial future. Every act of overt snub and every demeaning word was being meticulously recorded by a hidden mini-camera she'd planted on herself. Those recordings would become critical evidence in Alicia's covert audit of Grand Sky staff ethics. But in this moment, Sarah remained utterly confident in her actions. She returned to her duties with an easy air, chatting happily with the other first-class passengers, seemingly unfazed by Alicia, the woman she'd earmarked for ostracism. Alicia sat silently, gazing out the window. Outside the sky was a tranquil blue, belying the storm of injustice unfolding within the cabin. She understood that this flight was only the beginning. Those who had openly belittled her would soon learn the magnitude of their mistake. She hadn't come to prove she deserved a first-class seat. She'd come to prove that no one has the right to mistreat another human being, regardless of appearances. The covert struggle Sarah and Rachel thought they controlled was already shifting. And with her silent, unwavering strength, Alicia was poised to turn the tables and restore justice to its rightful place. Just as Alicia gazed out the window, lost in thought about everything she'd endured, a cold voice snapped her back to the tense reality of this flight. "Excuse me, Miss Morgan, we need you to move to a seat in the back for weight distribution." Sarah Barnes stood there, her posture rigid, her professional smile failing to mask a vicious chill. She spoke loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear, drawing curious and skeptical glances toward Alicia. Alicia turned, locking eyes with Sarah, and held her silence for a few seconds, as if to confirm she'd heard correctly. That momentary pause unsettled Sarah, but she quickly recovered, her gaze conveying a silent challenge. Alicia knew this wasn't a genuine safety request. It was a pointed insult meant to humiliate her in front of every first-class passenger. "Weight distribution," Alicia repeated calmly, enunciating each word with sharp authority. "Then why am I the only one being asked to move?" Sarah froze. She was used to compliant travelers who never questioned instructions. But Alicia's unwavering firmness left her no room to hide her bias. All around, other passengers leaned forward. Some exchanged curious looks. Others whispered among themselves, their eyes betraying doubt at the flight attendant's flimsy excuse. The cabin's atmosphere grew stifling, the tension almost palpable. Flustered, Sarah finally stammered. "It's just standard procedure. Your cooperation is appreciated." But her feeble explanation only undermined her credibility further. The injustice and absurdity of her demand were now obvious to everyone. Sarah looked around desperately for an ally, but no one dared intervene. They all recognized the grave error she'd just made by singling out a passenger so openly. Alicia said nothing. Instead, she calmly retrieved her phone and opened Advalink Group's secure internal app. With steady fingers, she typed a concise but powerful message. "Level 3, audit complete. Initiate official internal investigation immediately." Seconds later, the message was sent. Alicia knew that from this moment on, every discriminatory act by Rachel, Sarah, and their cohorts was in her hands and would be the focus of an irreversible internal probe. Sarah realized she just made a serious mistake, but she had no idea of the magnitude. In her mind, Alicia was still an ordinary woman easily dismissed. Soon, though, Sarah would face severe consequences triggered by her own prejudice and arrogance. Alicia set her phone down, then looked at Sarah again, this time with a gaze deeper and sharper than ever before. "If your concern really is weight distribution, then perhaps the problem isn't my seat." Sarah's face drained of color. She took a step back, utterly speechless. The cabin fell into complete silence. Alicia remained seated, expression unchanged, but the power in her quiet composure was shaking the very foundations of Sarah and Rachel's fabricated authority. Only minutes remained before takeoff. Neither Sarah nor Rachel could have guessed that Sarah's insulting request had just ignited a major internal investigation, one whose fallout would extend far beyond their job titles. Alicia Morgan, the woman they'd so rudely and foolishly targeted, now held real power in her hands, enough to reshape the fate of Grand Sky Airlines entirely. The covert battle Rachel and Sarah thought they controlled had flipped completely. Alicia stayed silent, but she was ready because she knew that from this moment on she alone would decide the final outcome of this fight. The instant the aircraft's wheels touched down on Seattle's runway, the tension in the cabin felt almost palpable. Alicia remained composed and courteous, unmoved by the ordeal she'd just endured. But she knew the decisive moment had arrived. As soon as the plane came to a complete stop and the door opened, an airport official approached Alicia with a serious expression. "Miss Morgan, please come with us." Alicia offered no surprise or protest. She rose gracefully, her eyes locking for a moment on Sarah Barnes, the lead flight attendant, still standing awkwardly nearby. Sarah averted her gaze, clearly unsettled by Alicia's unwavering confidence. Minutes later, Alicia found herself ushered into a small, austere conference room in the airport's secure area. A long, dark wood table dominated the space, surrounded by swivel chairs. Already seated were a senior executive from Grand Sky Airlines, two uniformed security officers, Sarah Barnes, her face drawn and anxious, and an FAA official, stern and attentive. Every gaze snapped to Alicia the moment she entered. Silence reigned, thick with suspicion, as if everyone expected her to stumble through an apology or a humiliating explanation. But Alicia remained unhurried. She settled into her chair, her eyes sweeping the room before resting on Sarah, whose panic was now obvious. Sarah clenched her trembling hands on the table, realizing she'd walked into a fight she couldn't control. "Miss Morgan," the Grand Sky representative began stiffly, breaking the silence. "We have reports that you caused a disturbance and refused to comply with safety requests from our crew." Alicia said nothing. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out the large red wax-sealed envelope bearing the Advalink Group crest. Her movements were deliberate and powerful. Everyone sensed something important was coming. Carefully, she opened the envelope and extracted a premium-quality document printed with her name and title at Advalink Group. She placed it on the table and spoke clearly, each word carrying the authority of her position. "I am Alicia Morgan, Senior Ethics Auditor for Advalink Group." She paused, her eyes gliding over every face in the room before continuing. "And I regret to inform you that Grand Sky Airlines has failed this audit in its entirety." Immediate shock filled the room. The airline executive's face went ashen. He had no prior knowledge of this secret internal audit. The security officers exchanged bewildered looks while the FAA official instantly began furiously taking notes. Sarah Barnes stiffened as well, her complexion drained. She realized in that instant the gravity of Alicia's declaration. No one had anticipated that the unassuming woman they deliberately insulted held the power to determine the airline's financial and reputational fate. Alicia remained calm, but her tone grew firmer and unforgiving. "All acts of discrimination, disrespect, and contempt I experience today have been fully documented. What disappoints me most is not the behavior of a few individuals, but the culture of prejudice tolerated at the management level of Grand Sky Airlines." The airline representative opened his mouth to offer a weak apology, but Alicia raised a hand to stop him. "I am not here for a simple apology." She looked him squarely in the eye. "What I need to see is the courage of this airline to confront and correct these serious cultural and operational failures." No one dared respond. Alicia's authority and unyielding stance dominated the room. The confrontation Rachel and Sarah thought they controlled had erupted into a full-blown crisis, one beyond anyone's ability to reverse. Alicia sat back, her gaze unwavering. But everyone in that conference room understood one thing. Alicia Morgan was not merely a formidable financial authority. She embodied a vital truth that anyone who treats another unfairly will ultimately pay a steep price. And from this moment on, the fates of Rachel, Sarah, and Grand Sky Airlines lay entirely in the hands of Alicia Morgan, the very woman they had so foolishly and cruelly judged. Tension in the conference room had reached a breaking point. Every eye was fixed on Alicia, whose unexpected seismic declaration still hung in the air. But she didn't leave them waiting long. Calmly, she pulled her phone from her bag and tapped the connection to the projection screen at the far end of the room. "Now, I'd like you to see for yourselves," Alicia said, her voice firm and unyielding. Seconds later, the large screen flared to life, revealing a high-definition video, secretly recorded footage of Rachel Barnes and Sarah Barnes engaging in outright racial discrimination. Their hateful remarks, dismissive stares, and cold, triumphant smirks played out in vivid detail, leaving no room for denial. Every insult, every gesture of contempt was laid bare for all to see. The Grand Sky Airlines executive's face drained of color, his eyes wide with horror as he realized that what he'd taken for routine professionalism was in fact irrefutable proof of a deep-seated culture of prejudice. Across the room, Sarah sat frozen, her body trembling, cold sweat beating at her temples. She watched in horror as her own actions and Rachel's were broadcast before the stern FAA official and the airline's leadership team. The airline representative rose, shoulders slumped, and addressed Alicia in a desperate, halting voice. "Miss Morgan, on behalf of Grand Sky Airlines, I offer our sincerest apologies. This conduct is utterly unacceptable, and we will—" Alicia raised a hand to cut him off, her gaze steely. "I'm not here for apologies." She held his eyes with unflinching intensity. "I want to see genuine accountability. I want you to acknowledge your flawed culture and actually change." Silence enveloped the room again. This time the silence of shame and bitter defeat. Alicia wasn't here to hear empty words. She was here to demand real transformation. Everyone in that room understood that Alicia Morgan represented a power far greater than a single offended passenger. She embodied the authority to force the airline to confront the truth and be held responsible. Sarah, now utterly broken, could hardly breathe. She knew her career at Grand Sky Airlines had ended in that small, windowless room. The FAA official spoke up, his tone grave and authoritative. "This evidence reveals a serious ethical and service quality lapse at Grand Sky Airlines. We require an immediate detailed report on how you will address these violations." Alicia scanned the assembled executives and regulators, her expression cold but purposeful. Grand Sky Airlines has been warned repeatedly about discrimination, yet nothing meaningful has changed. Today I expect not just isolated terminations, but a full restructuring of your systems to eradicate this toxic culture once and for all. Her words rang like a verdict, decisive, uncompromising, and final. Alicia knew that true change would never stem from easy apologies. It would demand deep self-reflection and the courage to face hard truths. In that moment, the Grand Sky Airlines representative bowed his head in silent agreement, acutely aware that the airline now faced a profound crisis. Rachel, Sarah, and everyone who had disparaged Alicia understood that the cost of their prejudice would be far greater than lost jobs or damaged reputations. It threatened to dismantle an entire corrupt power structure. Alicia rose slowly, reclaiming her sealed envelope with quiet resolve. She had fought not just for her own dignity, but for every individual victimized by injustice, and she would not stop there. The covert battle Rachel and Sarah thought they controlled had reached its definitive conclusion. Victory belonged unequivocally to Alicia Morgan, the unassuming woman they had so foolishly underestimated. They had learned a hard truth. Prejudice and discrimination can never prevail against courage and the unvarnished truth. The moment Alicia left that small conference room, an oppressive silence settled over the space. The truth that had been revealed forced everyone inside to confront a harsh reality they'd never anticipated. What they couldn't foresee was just how quickly and how severely the fallout would engulf Grand Sky Airlines. Less than 24 hours after that tense meeting, Advalink Group, the airline's most powerful and essential financial partner, publicly announced it was suspending all merger negotiations with Grand Sky indefinitely. The TUR's uncompromising statement spread instantly across major media outlets, sending shockwaves through the aviation and finance industries. Almost immediately, the vital $4.88 billion bailout that had been the airline's lifeline through months of crisis was frozen. Investors pulled out en masse. Grand Sky stock plummeted without pause, and the airline's leadership found itself paralyzed and directionless. In an instant, the distinguished carrier stood on the brink of bankruptcy, facing the darkest threat in its history. Inside the company, the repercussions were swift and brutal, especially for Rachel and Sarah Barnes, the very figures at the heart of the discrimination scandal. Rachel Barnes, who had long prided herself on absolute control at Cleargate Airport, was placed on indefinite suspension. The notice arrived at her office, cold, final, and offering no chance for explanation. The career she'd built over decades collapsed in a single day. At the same time, Sarah Barnes, the lead flight attendant who'd treated Alicia with contempt, faced similarly harsh consequences. Grand Sky leadership permanently removed her from all first-class service duties. Every perk, privilege, and ounce of respect she'd enjoyed vanished. She was reassigned to low-profile domestic routes, forced to rebuild her career amid humiliation, but the fallout didn't stop with Rachel and Sarah. Every employee connected directly or indirectly to the incident was required to participate in a specialized anti-discrimination training program personally designed by Alicia Morgan. This wasn't a token gesture. It was a deep systemic overhaul of company culture, an uncompromising lesson in human dignity, equality, and respect. Alicia aimed to ensure that nothing like this would ever happen again at Grand Sky. Throughout the airline's offices, a gloomy chaos reigned. Departments fell into disarray. Hundreds of panicked emails and calls flew back and forth as employees struggled to understand how a seemingly isolated incident could trigger a financial catastrophe of this magnitude. In desperation, Grand Sky Board called an emergency meeting to chart a path forward. But everyone knew there was no escaping accountability this time. The collapse they faced wasn't just the result of a few irresponsible individuals. It was the inevitable outcome of a long-tolerated culture of bias, favoritism, and injustice. Elsewhere, Alicia Morgan absorbed the news with calm resolve. She felt no pleasure in witnessing Rachel and Sarah's downfall, only the satisfaction that justice had been served. To her, the goal was never punishment for its own sake, but genuine transformation, a profound shift in attitudes, behaviors, and the way people treated one another, regardless of rank or appearance. For Grand Sky Airlines, the dire penalties they now endured were more than a cautionary tale about discrimination. They were a resounding warning to the entire service industry. No one has the right to demean another, and prejudice carries an unbearably high price. The battle Rachel and Sarah once believed they would easily win had reached its finale, and the result was nothing like what they'd imagined. Alicia Morgan, the unassuming woman they'd so foolishly scorned, had single-handedly dismantled the power and prestige they wielded, propelling them and the entire airline into a reality for which none of them had ever prepared. A week after that unprecedented crisis, Cleargate Airport had slowly returned to its usual rhythm. Elegant travelers, gleaming suitcases, and busy flights once again filled the terminals with their familiar energy. yet whispers of the scandal still drifted through the crowds, a reminder of how devastating prejudice and bias can be. One late afternoon, Alicia returned to Cleargate, this time for a very different purpose. Gone were the suspicious glances and hateful remarks. She walked through the airport with her characteristic calm confidence. Her face was serene, devoid of any triumphal arrogance, just the quiet satisfaction of knowing justice had been served. As she made her way down a busy corridor, Alicia spotted a familiar figure tucked away at a small customer service desk in the public arrivals area. It was Rachel Barnes, the very woman who had once scorned and insulted her so cruelly. Now stripped of her authority, Rachel sat in a simple uniform, her name tag gone and her title erased. The powerful, cold self-assurance she'd once worn like armor had vanished, replaced by exhaustion and regret. Alicia paused and watched from a distance. She felt no glee at Rachel's fallen state, only sadness for someone who'd had the chance to do right but had chosen poorly, blinded by prejudice and misplaced pride. Sensing someone's gaze, Rachel looked up slowly. When her eyes met Alicia's, she trembled shame and fear flickering across her face. In that moment, Alicia saw that Rachel finally understood her mistake, but it was far too late to undo the past. Alicia approached the desk and stood before Rachel, head bowed. Rachel mumbled in embarrassment. I'm sorry." Alicia didn't respond immediately. She simply looked at Rachel for a long, silent moment before speaking softly. "You were right once, Rachel. I'm not like most people in first class," she said, her voice gentle yet powerful, each word resonating in Rachel's mind. "I didn't come here to sit in a seat. I came to see how many people still remembered how to treat another human being." Her words held no malice, no anger, only a profound kindness and strength. Tears welled in Rachel's eyes as she realized for the first time the weight of her wrongdoing. Alicia nodded once, then turned and walked away, leaving Rachel in stunned silence. Passers-by, staff members, even those who overheard the exchange, paused, struck by the profound lesson Alicia had imparted. This final encounter wasn't about displaying the power of a victor. It was Alicia's way of sending a deeper message. Human dignity isn't measured by appearance or status, but by the respect and compassion we show one another. From that day on, the story of Alicia Morgan and Grand Sky Airlines became a lasting lesson in honor, humility, and humanity. Those who once discriminated learned that prejudice can never triumph over courage and truth, and that real power lies not in threats, but in kindness and the capacity for change. As Alicia disappeared into the bustling crowd, she didn't look back. Around her, the airport fell into a thoughtful hush, as if every person present was silently reflecting on that vital lesson. And so Alicia Morgan's story came to a close, not just as the triumph of one individual over injustice, but as the victory of empathy and humanity over blind pride and prejudice, a lesson we would all do well to remember. We must always treat one another with respect and compassion, for in the end, that is the greatest power we each can hold. If this story has inspired you or given you something to think about, please like, share, and subscribe for more powerful, thought-provoking tales. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next video.